The top priority for Democrats right now doesn't seem to be fighting violent crime or helping students succeed or getting our homeless veterans off the streets. It appears to be catching flights to El Salvador to meet with an illegal alien who I guess they think is the photo op of the century. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen was the first Democrat to make that journey. He sat down with the man that the White House has accused of being MS-13. A group of House Democrats followed then in Van Hollen's footsteps.
If there's not due process for Kilmar, there will be no due process for anyone. We want to make sure that Kilmar is still alive.
This is not just a threat to all people in the United States who could be illegally abducted, detained, and transported internationally against their will. This is what we all have been calling a constitutional crisis.
We're here to raise awareness that Kilmar needs to come home. We need to build support here in El Salvador, but also in the United States. He must come home.
Where is the constitutional crisis actually written down on a Post-it note for Democrats to say over and over about a ton of different issues? Anyway, Florida Congressman Maxwell Frost was among those Democrats who flew to El Salvador, and he spoke to Will Cain.
You are there for an El Salvadorian man who was a resident illegally of Maryland. You're a congressman from Florida. Why are you in El Salvador?
Every person in our country deserves due process. And we want to make sure that we draw the line here at Kilmar Garcia because it's not just about him.
He's an illegal alien. He's an illegal alien. Who's from El Salvador? Molly.
I just cannot believe how blessed the Republican Party and Donald Trump are in who their political opponents are. We just had a massive election where we talked about immigration and the illegal immigration that brought in more than 10 million people illegally under Joe Biden. It was a shellacking for the Democrat Party. And then they're choosing not to care about any of the many issues affecting American citizens. And instead, they're going to El Salvador to help someone who two countries view as a terrorist. It's just a horrible message to voters.
By the way, has already soaked up a lot of taxpayer dollars in and out of our courts. And two courts found that there was reason to believe that he is a member of MS-13, and he was on a final deport list anyway. So even if they bring him here, they have to kick him out anyway.
As much as it's a blessing politically for Republicans, though, it's a curse for their constituents. I was going through a few of those congressional districts earlier today, and you look at the unemployment rates, the educational levels, you know, the lack of upward mobility. You know, we saw this, to your point, in the election. People in Chicago, they were having these town halls like, you know, I mean, I've been living in Chicago in the housing projects for the 5th generation, and you've got these buses of people handing them credit cards and handing them luxury hotels. And when the hell did this happen? Someone here is illegal. They broke a law, and there's a lot of evidence he's part of a dangerous gang. Why is this soaking up so much of your interest when we are actually out here struggling to make ends meet and to have hope for our own children? I can't believe, you know, they've taken for granted they're always going to be elected. And I guess in certain areas they will, for whatever reason, but their constituents are suffering big time. And this is an atrocity, an outright atrocity.
That line about taking for granted what they, you know, what they do with all their constituents, like, oh, just vote for me anyway.
I just feel like some of the Democrats are trying to figure out how to keep their party alive. They got the memo. It's a constitutional crisis. So now they're all using the same lingo, no matter where they go. And it's funny, the Congress people that went down to talk to this alleged MS-13 gang member.
Well, he is confirmed illegal alien.
Well, you know.
Yeah, that much we know.
Okay. They have not basically asked him whether he was a member, right?
Yes.
The senator went down there and did not ask if he was a member of the gang. I mean, so where are we going with this? And some of their constituents very, very upset that they're there. They're saying there's so many problems in their own neighborhood. Why are they going there and not taking care of the homeless, the veterans who are living on the streets?
Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland, by the way. So that is the home state of Rachel Marin, who was killed by an illegal alien. Haven't heard him even mention her name in this conversation.
And never met with the family at all.
I mean, nobody went to El Salvador. He said he didn't ask this guy, whether or not he was actually in the gang, as 2 courts have found evidence.
And by the way, that was
because
from
he
the
knew the
legacy
answer.
media asked that question. They even were curious.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
It wasn't Fox News who asked.
Yeah,
it was the legacy
Dana Bash.
media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, to Molly's point, Americans were demanding border security in this 2024 election. And it seems like very interesting timing that Democrats right now are continuing to do this media blitz. And, you know, as we pointed out, constitutional crisis, that is a term that each one of these representatives that went down has said. So obviously these are talking points. Obviously this is for media. And obviously it is, again, Democrats are very out of touch of what Americans, their constituents, actually want. Here's my question, and this, you know, this case offers the Democrats a chance to attack the Trump immigration policy and the way that he's doing things, because, well, they did come out and they said that there was an error, that he wasn't supposed to be deported, but now that he's there, it's up to the El Salvadorian. My concern is, real quick, Molly, and then I know you want to jump in, but my concern is that this gives some fuel to the Democrats as they're yelling about due process. And so for President Trump, what he needs to demonstrate is it's not a power grab and that he will follow the judicial process, because he got a lot of centrist voters in this last election. And if he wants to maintain that support, he has to make sure that he's following the judicial process.
Just a point of clarification really quick.
Say this, and maybe you can back me up on this. What was decided wasn't that he should not be deported. He shouldn't have gone to El Salvador, because he made the argument in court that if he went there, his rival gangs would kill him.
Which then begs the point, how can you say he's not a part of the gang?
No, that's exactly right. He was actually supposed to be deported. After he goes through the whole deportation proceedings, then he comes up with a claim that many years prior, some member of his family might have been targeted by some gang. It was a very last-ditch attempt to stay in this country. But that was a mistake, that he should have been sent to a different country, I guess, than El Salvador.
And by the way, he didn't claim asylum or anything else until after he was picked up by ICE, and that's something that people have to remember as well.
Because he was hiding in plain sight.
He was just here illegally. He had already been, law enforcement had picked him up a couple times. He had the domestic violence complaint from his then girlfriend or wife. I mean, it doesn't seem like he's the greatest guy, and I'm not sure Democrats really want this to be their poster child of who they're there to support.
And the constitutional crisis is that you can come into this country illegally, and there's nothing any American can do about it. Even if it's tens of millions of people, there's no due process affiliated with illegal entrance into the country or illegal residency here. But then once you try to do something about it, when the American people say, we desperately want something done about this, then all of a sudden there's any barrier can be erected, courts can intervene, and you can't have the will of the people mean anything. That's the crisis.
Can I ask you a follow, Molly? Because I know you've been working a lot on this issue. Why is it that former President Obama could literally kick out millions of criminals who were here illegally and not have an injunction against him, and Trump has dozens against him, and he's kicked out, what, 100,000?
Right. It does seem that there are things that any president can do that when Donald Trump does it, all of a sudden you have massive judicial interventions. There is a large, coordinated, well-funded campaign to make it so that whatever President Trump does, there will be legal barriers erected. And it really is a problem, because the courts have a legitimacy mostly because people just choose to respect them. The more that they violate our constitutional order by saying that they get to decide what the executive branch does and that the American people have no say, you're going to have people not respect the courts as much. And that's why there's a lot of pressure on Chief Justice John Roberts to get things in order.
Well, they call it Trump derangement syndrome for a reason. I mean, it's real.
Yeah. Well, now it's got, what, a super PAC? You didn't say that, but I'm sure there's money involved. All right, we'll move on.
Hey, everyone. I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.